All right, we need to talk about the origin of humanity for a second. When I say the origin of humanity, I'm talking about this book that I've been reading called The Epic of Humanity by Billy Carson and Matthew Lacroix. And I'm talking about prison planet theory. I'm talking about aliens. I'm talking about spirituality. I'm talking about all of it. God in general. So, if you're interested in those kind of things, stay tuned because I've been putting some pieces together in my mind after reading this book and just starting to learn more about ancient civilizations and ancient history outside of what we've been taught in school. Obviously, there's other things when it comes to slavery and recent history that I've done research on, Native American history, but I want to look back further, you know? And reading this book has showed me how much we have not been taught, regardless of the truth of it. It just shows a lot about indoctrination, what we wanted to believe, fear mongering, all these things that So just to give a synopsis so you know where I'm going today, we're really going to be talking about the origin of humanity from the perspective of ancient civilizations, ancient texts that haven't been mostly known to the whole world, specifically cuneiform tablets, which they talk a lot about in this book. We're going to talk about the prison planet theory because this book doesn't talk about that, but it brought me back to theories that I had looked into previously based on my own beliefs. We're talking about reincarnation, and we're going to dip into AI a little bit too. Also gods, both, Roman gods, Greek gods, mythology, and just regular gods, us possibly being gods, and the universal creator. So I'll just tell you kind of my belief system currently. I would say I'm a very spiritual person, open to a lot of different things, but not sure about a lot of different things. I believe in reincarnation. I believe aliens exist. I believe that we can live on other planets outside of this life. I believe we are souls. I believe that God exists as us and outside of us, if that makes sense. Like, we are gods just as much as someone who could have created us, as my belief. So let's first hop into this book so I can give you a little background about where I'm coming with this. I have so many questions, and I just want to have this conversation and kind of build this dialogue about creationism. As humans, I don't think we have the ability to fully grasp or understand the vastness or the intricacies of the universe, the intricacies of creationism, the intricacies of our lives as souls outside of this human experience. I don't think any of us living on this planet right now would 100% know the truth. I will start with the prison planet theory, actually, because this is what reminded me of this book and gave me my initial skepticism to the idea of reincarnation. Sorry, let me take it back one more step because I just want to talk about my belief in religion, or lack of belief in religion currently. Like, I grew up as Christian and had parents who didn't heavily do day-to-day Christian things, or we went to church only until I was in 8th grade. Sorry, only until I was 8 years old, and then we moved on. Once I hit that age of late elementary school, I started not really caring too much, or not really believing a lot of the things that were subscribed to through religion. Unfortunately, I feel like there was a lot of focus on the sinning side of things and how bad those sins were and what sins were worse than others, and not resonating or feeling like any of that was true, and that not feeling like a hell existed, not feeling like those things were real based on my own intuition. And so I kind of stopped really associating with Christianity and started looking into other religions, looking into other spiritualities. I also early on believed in reincarnation because it just kind of felt right. I don't know if you guys know what I mean when I say I just felt these things were true. When I would read about it in other texts, I was like, that feels right to me. When I read about certain conspiracy theories that I know are not conspiracies, or just general theories or general truths that have happened, I'm like, that feels really real to me. That feels like something that has happened, and there's all this information, there's all this firsthand stories from people that are proving it to be true. So that's kind of how I navigate life, a little more intuitively when it comes to what I decide to believe and not believe. So even with that intuition, I also am open to being proven wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I will change my mind if I feel like what I thought in the past was just not true anymore. So that's just kind of like, ooh. Now my forehead looking big as hell. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So the prison planet theory, it has to do with reincarnation, which is why I brought up the earlier thing about my beliefs and how they changed and why I was even open to this being truthful. So the prison planet theory was a theory that essentially Earth, I don't know if you guys can hear my cat doing that. So the prison planet theory was first started or theorized by an ecologist named Dr. Ellis Silver. And he's essentially saying that this Earth is a prison planet because we are stuck in a cycle of reincarnation. When you look at the idea of reincarnation and us coming back, life and life again, without the memory of the past life, leads us into this continuous loop and cycle where if we were supposed to learn certain lessons and we did learn some in this lifetime, how would we know to take them into the next lifetime? That loss of memory, why does it exist for humans? And what's the benefit of that? And if it was for a good reason, what would be the benefit of that? A part of me has seen ideas about that being, oh, well, we don't remember because we wouldn't be living our most authentic life if we knew. We wouldn't be able to learn the lessons the same if we were able to remember everything from the past. And I don't fully believe that's true, because in my mind, I imagine other existences, other planets, to have that ability of knowing much more than what exists in their specific lifetime. That's just a thought. But to continue, this theory is saying reincarnation, the loop, the cycle is prison-like. Along with that, you look at what we do on a day-to-day basis, how we live, and the chaotic and sometimes evil nature of humanity, nature of almost the world in general. And this brought me to a theory by Frank Schopenhauer, I think that's his name, that I talked about before, where, he said our goal as humans is to limit the amount of suffering that we're enduring. Like, that is what we do on a day-to-day basis. You think of the inherent nature of humans, of mammals in general. It's a eater-be-eaten world. Natural cycle of one organism eating another to sustain themselves. You think about our day-to-day life. We have to eat to survive. We have to drink to survive. We have to relieve ourselves. Those things aren't, if we take them on its own, those things sound fine, right? That's just the natural cycle of life. But the lack of doing them results in pain, results in starving and suffering. It's like, I think he was trying to make the point that everything we do is to limit our suffering. Regardless of the food tastes good, but if we don't have it, there's an inherent negative consequence. So this Frank Schopenhauer theory associated with the prison planet theory by Dr. Ellis is like, okay, you see this life. I do want to say it's like a very negative view on life, sure. Like, I'm not sitting here and acting like there isn't true beauty in humanity, true beauty in this earth. But that is what you have to see the world through a lens of if you don't want to commit to a depressive life. If you look at the world for what it is, let's take it to the point of war, poverty, like the acts that people commit on a day-to-day basis. You would see that this is like a fucked up place. Like, Earth is fucked up. Let's be honest. I can be a very loving person. You can be a very loving person. You can have all the goodness in your heart. And that's great. But there is someone who is the exact opposite of you that exists as well. There's the polar opposite. There's someone who wants to kill every day. There's someone who wants to be greedy, who wants to do all those things. And that's just the way it is. Sure, maybe there's supposed to be a yin and yang, maybe there's supposed to be a balance, but we are not at the balance. We are definitely tipping over into more evil than more good right now. And that has existed for a while now. And that's when things get really, really, really fucked up. And then you look at the density of humanity and how, like, people talk about passing and coming back to life, and how, oh my gosh, a weight was lifted off me. The meat suit the meat suit of a human body was released, and those people that were told that they had to come back, that it wasn't their time, are like, I don't want to go back. I feel so light. I feel so full of love. I feel so good outside of this heavy human life. And I think that shows something too. It's like, sure, there's lessons to be learned here. And I think as a spiritual person, you have to just as much tap into your humanity and being a human and living as a human as you do spirituality. I think people can sometimes be like too much on the high horse, the righteousness side of things, without valuing the things that do exist while being a human. So, sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place, but when I heard about this theory, I was like, that kind of sounds right. Because when I first left Christianity and started believing in things like reincarnation, believing in things like aliens, believing in past lives, believing in the universe as more of a god than a specific being, I was like, wow, that makes sense. We get to live these multiple lives. Very cool, very cool. And then I heard the prison planet theory, and I was like, wait, is it cool? Because if I'm continuously stuck in this cycle, coming to this planet specifically, why would I want to keep coming here if I see the hurt and the pain and the suffering that is constantly existing? Constantly. What is beautiful about that? Yes, you find beauty in everything. There's beauty in pain. But have we only taught ourselves that there's beauty in pain because we have to endure it? You know what I mean? Now let's get into this book. If you are someone who does heavily believe in something that your opinion could not be swayed, then maybe this isn't the book for you. But if you are open-minded and you are curious and you are wondering and you're looking for answers about the origins of humanity, or just more perspective, because I think that's what I do a lot when I get information. It's like, you have to understand that there's nuance to everything you read, that there's bias to everything you read, and you have to make the decision for yourself at the end of the day. But being like, you have to have an open mind to read this and not immediately say, that's fucking false, that can't be true. Because they talk about many things that aren't normal to the current society, to the current human that exists. But at the same time, if we're talking about hundreds and thousands of years ago, how could we sit here and say that human lived over 600 years? How could that even be possible? You know what I mean? Like, you have to be open-minded in the sense of believing the unbelievable. So, this book is talking about cuneiform tablets and the origins of humanity based on who created us, what our purpose was, and what we get to decide with our own futures. Humans, even if our purpose initially was created to be slave-like. I feel like the most prominent forms of creationism lie within the Big Bang Theory, the more scientific side, and religion, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and every single religion throughout the world. But when you look at those religions, you find that a lot of them align. And a lot of them align with these cuneiform tablets that existed. And some of these tablets are like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Atrahasis, and the Sumerians' King List, which are where they're deriving a lot of their history. So I want you to see this from the perspective of being historically accurate, regardless of whatever exists in the text being true. You can look at religious history and say, this is what happened, but this could be based off of a text or words that necessarily weren't 100% true. That could have been a fiction, that could have been a myth, could have been, fallacy. So just keep that in mind, obviously. So it was like the best way to preserve information at the time, because these tablets would last thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, and could hold this information much longer than paper and pen and, could. First, let me tell you, there are thousands of these tablets in museums that have yet to be decoded, which I think says a lot about how much history we don't have access to. Now, of these, I would say like a few hundred have been decoded based on the book by George Smith and a couple other Assyriologists, which are just essentially specialists in the study of ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Assyria, which includes the history, the language, the archaeology, etc. So George Smith was seen as the most prominent Assyriologist of like, it's the 1800s or the 1900s. Can't remember specific dates, y'all. I'm not good when it comes to memory, which is why I try to study a lot more history now and write things down, like, and take notes, because I know I'm trying to get better at that. I'm like, I only read these days with a highlighter and a pen, because it's the only way I'm gonna remember the shit that's important. These Assyriologists are decoding these cuneiform tablets, and they're finding that, you know, the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, they are talking about the same things with different names for the gods, for the people within the stories, which aligns with the Bible, which aligns with the Quran, aligns with Indian Vedas. All of these things will go by different names when it comes to the current stories of Christianity and stuff. Like, I don't align with a lot of that because they have been whitewashed, and that's just the truth. If you look into the history, my first idea of that was knowing that Christianity was taken from Egyptian spirituality, and what is happening is like you're taking bits and pieces of what applies best for the life you want to live. And when I'm saying you, I'm talking about the person who wrote it in a way that would put them at the top, that would make them feel superior, that would put them in the best position for them to live the best life, which is what I think happens with religion. And then on top of that, just because a religious text says something doesn't mean it's all truth. Doesn't mean that's how we should be living. Doesn't mean that that's how life should be. And I think people do that all the time. Let's say that the Christian Bible was true. Let's say all those things happened. That doesn't mean that we should be living by those rules, in my opinion. Bringing it back to the book, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what these tablets say about the origins of humanity. They talk about a group of individuals called the Anunnaki. I previously had only heard of the Anunnaki through like the spiritual world, almost as a being that existed on this planet that some spiritual people have like had connection or conversation with. I don't know in what way. I think I kind of saw them mostly as an alien species, which based on this they are. The Anunnaki came to Earth. These were godlike beings that came to Earth for a specific reason before they created humanity. Sorry, I just jumped ahead, but according to these tablets, the Anunnaki are the creators of humanity. Creators of humanity in the same way that we are a mother to our child. Like, you created humanity, but with the same levels, the same godlike abilities that they have. Okay, sorry. So this book does talk about the reason for the Anunnaki coming to Earth long ago was not given. The tablet doesn't give a specific reason for it, but the book infers based on decoding them that they came because Earth had something that they wanted, that they had some idea to create a new civilization before humans were even thought to be created. And some of that belief is based on Earth's electromagnetic field, that Earth had a certain level of energy, ability for rejuvenation that maybe didn't exist in other planets. So the story goes that Agigi gods, which were a lower class of demigods within the Anunnaki, were cast to create civilization on the Earth's land, to excavate Earth, essentially, to create civilization. So for 3,600 years, the Agigi gods were grueling labor trying to make the Earth livable for a civilization. And this is based on the Atrahasis. So it says the Agigi gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. For 3,600 years, they bore the excess. And then they're saying that there are these two gods within the Anunnaki. One's named Enlil, one's named Ea. And these gods live on different dimensions. One lives in the lower dimension and is kind of the god of the underworld, which would associate with the either Roman or Greek god of Osiris, which had that same position. This is what I mean by like when stories align, but these beings have different names. You're seeing how different civilizations across the world have written down and gotten the same information with different names. Same stories, different names. Like there's no difference there. You know what I mean? So, back to the story. As they're excavating the Earth to create this civilization, At the time, this must have not been for human civilization, but once the Ajiji gods got angry, they got tired of doing this work because they were doing it for 3,600 years. They decided to go talk to the god of the underworld and say, hey, this is too fucking much. This is like a lot for me. And we need y'all to do something about it. Please and thank you. And so they had a little meeting, and Ea, and Leo, and all the Ajiji gods, all the Anunnaki were deciding, okay, what are we gonna do? And they said, okay, yeah, you're bearing too much. Now, they said, what if we create a species that will do the work for us? Now let me tell you what they said. Let us create a mortal man, so that he may bear the yoke, the work of Enlil. Let man bear the load of the gods. Nintu made her voice heard and spoke, on the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month I shall make a purification by washing. Then one god shall be slaughtered. Then a god and a man will be mixed together in clay. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh, and let the ghost exist as to not forget the slain god. Ooh. So, essentially they're saying, oh, let's kill an Anunnaki, let's mix him with clay, whatever the fuck that means, not really sure, and let's create a mortal man. Now, to many Christians, this mortal man would be Adam. So it says, from his blood, Ea created mankind, on whom he imposed the service of the gods. After the wise Ea had created mankind and had imposed the service of the gods upon them, the task was beyond comprehension. The gods were then divided, all of the Anunnaki, into upper and lower groups. He assigned 300 in the heavens to guard the decrees of Anu and appointed them as guard. So what if heaven and hell is not heaven and hell, you die and you go there? It's dimensions of existence. And the same way I think about the Bible, when I read it, I'm like, let's say this happened. That doesn't mean it was right. Let's say we were created to be slaves. What if we were? What if we were just a slave-like existence? Our creation solely existed to do work for another being. That would make sense. According to the prison planet theory, we were created by an alien species simply for their benefit. But regardless of that, I don't think that makes our existence only meaningful for that. You know what I mean? The book also talks about how one of these Anunnaki had the idea of human creationism based on the tablets before the Ajiji gods started complaining. So they already wanted to create this thing. They already had this idea. And when they created humanity, all speculation, the languages used in the tablets show the power of humanity to be just as, or even more so, than the Anunnaki, because they say Ea had created him, Adapa, the perfect human. Adapa is known as Adam in the Bible. It says Ea had created him, Adapa, the perfect human, as chief among men, a wise man whose command none shall oppose. The prudent, the most wise among the Anunnaki was he. And this book says, if they're saying he is the most wise among the Anunnaki, among the gods that created him, then that provides evidence to show that we are not just a creation of the Anunnaki. We are the Anunnaki. We are gods in the same breath. Now, before I learned about any of this, I always felt that we've had the power of being our own God. I've said it in my TikTok before. You know, when people say that they have interactions with someone else on the street, or they're like, I just felt the need to do this for this person. I just felt the need to go say this to this person. People see those as angels in their life. Because maybe we are getting the downloads. Maybe we are hearing the prayers of others and we are feeling the inclination to do something about it, to change their mind, to change their future based on what they have put out into the ether. And you may say, oh, that was God answering the prayer. Yes, it was God in that other person. Someone was accepted for a job that they weren't qualified for, but they needed in that moment. They were homeless and they asked for this. And this person, despite how crazy of a request it may have been, they said, I don't know why, but like, this feels right. Our intuition, our ability to feel that, I just think shows that God exists as us. And I feel like people see that as, you know, someone trying to put themselves on a pedestal. But how am I putting myself on a pedestal if I think every single person has that ability? Everybody has that power. So let's get into like the evil levels that exist on this earth a little bit, because if you look at our history, what do they say? Whoever writes your history writes your present, writes your future. And there's a consistent battle, consistent warlike kingship energy that exists in humanity, right? They say Mesopotamian tablets state that the Anuna are governed by a largely male-dominated hierarchy kingship structure, which was directly based on specific royal bloodlines ruling over the rest of society. Sound familiar? Right. That is why, as humanity, we would follow those same guidelines. They say, when I look around the world at the unbalanced mentalities and fear-based systems that govern most people's lives, I find myself both angry and sad over how humanity has been treated. I don't see this flawed structure and false identity as merely the result of a few powerful families or corrupted secret societies, but a much deeper ideology that connects all the way back to the original kingship model. It's clear to me that an elaborate and a highly complex system was eventually created here to turn society into obedient, productive workers that are ruled by fear and ask very few questions to challenge authority. The most effective ways to rule over a society is through fear and rewriting their history, while at the same time promoting war, division, and materialism as the main focus. This conditioning of reality was done for the means of trapping humanity in an endless cycle of reincarnation, where they often repeat the same life over and over again until they are finally woken up to the truth. Now, when you look at things that way, it's very sad, it's very upsetting. But at the same time, it makes so much sense when you look at fear-based systems in society. I constantly talk about how fear is the number one tactic used by our government, by religion, by so many things that keep us in a place of I feel like we're just not living in our most powerful self, if that makes sense. And I think what has me like resonating with so much of this book, not even fully on the level of whatever exists in the text being 100% true, but the constant battle and warlike mentality that humanity has, the constant fear-based mentality, the constant lack of ability to see ourselves outside of the levels of slavery that we exist under, outside of the slavery that existed in the past. Like, there's still a current form of slavery that exists. And to see those struggles at a smaller level, but that they could go back to an expanded level of even like the creator to the creation existence would just make so much sense. On my own beliefs, I think about like, there has to be so much better. I don't know, I've always felt that there's something so wrong with the world that we live in. No matter how much of a positive lens I can put on things, no matter how much I can remove myself from what is happening in the external world. You know, I always talk about focusing on yourself, focusing on what you can handle, focusing on what you can do, because there is a level of knowing the atrocities of this world that is only going to make you angry and upset, and is going to put you in a space to where you feel hopeless, and it's going to put you in a space to where you feel like you can't change anything about the future. And that mentality does no good for you or anyone else in this world. And I think the worst part of it is like, damn, you see how history is repeating itself, and to think that it's not just generational trauma that you have to work through like your family, that's brought down through your family, but mentalities and fears and subconscious propaganda that's been implemented since the beginning of our existence. Now, while that's said, that doesn't mean that that's humanity's purpose in the universe. You know what I mean? That's like saying, like, some people could be like, oh, well, that's the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's how we were created. That's what we were created for. No. I like to compare this like so far out example to our day-to-day life, even bringing it to like the creator and the creation, the mother and the daughter, in the same ways that your mom could have created you and forced you to do certain things, forced you to be a certain way negatively, that doesn't mean that that was your purpose. You being created for that doesn't mean that's how you should be living, and that it takes years and years to unlearn those things. The same way it would should probably take lifetimes and life cycles to rise above whatever thought of being a human should be, or if it is the level of consciousness you have to reach to where you're not reincarnating on this earth anymore. If that's what it is, I'm not sure that that's true. Also, I feel like that wouldn't be fair. Then again, the world isn't fair, so maybe that doesn't matter, but it just feels unfair because it just seems unfair. Point blank period. Like the book says, let's say the Anunnaki created our species to be a slave species, created to do this work on this earth, and now we continue going through these reincarnation cycles to continue to do that for them on their behalf, and kept at such a certain level of unknowing so that we don't become our own most powerful, most free being. That doesn't mean that humans shouldn't have the ability to choose their own destiny in the universe outside of just this human experience, which I think was a very good conclusion. And I'm only halfway through this book, y'all, so we're definitely gonna have a part 2 to this, but all this information just has me reeling because I need to bring it further. I need to bring it further for 1 second because a part of me doesn't understand. Now, this is where I need y'all's help. Like, I don't know if you have any knowledge on these things or if you have any ideas or intuitive thoughts. It's like, let's say that humans did come to excavate this planet to create civilization for the Anunnaki. Let's say that the earth does have these electromagnetic fields where certain places like the pyramids were initially created for harvesting energy, for certain aspects, whatever this god species wanted to do with that. Not sure. At what point does that not matter anymore? At what point did we finish the excavation of the earth to where a civilization is created? What now? And then also, let's say the Anunnaki existed on these planes, the dimensions, like there's upper and lower dimensions. Let's say that they left the earthly dimension. Would they ever come back? And if they are, how have they come back? Under what guise have they come back? And based on these stories, the same way that the Noah's Ark happened in the Bible, Adapa, the myth of Adapa, the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, all of these stories stop at that story of wiping away humanity to start anew. Because supposedly the Anunnaki were split at that point. They decided to do this act to wash everyone away, but there wasn't agreement among all the gods that that was the right decision to be made. And so there was this split between the gods, and they just did not come to earth again. Now that's the history based on these cuneiform tablets. Regardless of if it's true or not, it's like, what did that look like if they existed on the same plane as us while we were around? And obviously, for what reasons can that not happen? And will there be a point where it does happen again? And if their lives are so long, it wouldn't be odd that within multiple generations, let's say even 10 generations of a human life, 10 times 70, 700 years, is not a lot for them to not come out and be seen among humans. I also like to think about Rick and Morty. I think that reading books like this just brings me to the idea that, let's say a God does exist. Let's say a God, a creator exists outside of us. That doesn't mean that they're good. That doesn't mean that they're at our best interest. That's a maybe more scary thought, a more scary possibility. But if it was true, like, what are you going to do with that information? You're going to stop putting a God outside of yourself on such a high pedestal when whatever has happened, whatever they have done to you, doesn't exist in a vacuum anymore. The same way as you can have a mother or a father that does not work at your best interest, even though you put them on this pedestal because they created you. I feel like using these analogies shows that just as much as your creator brought you into this life doesn't negate you from being just as important as that. The creator to the creation doesn't make one any less valuable, any more inferior. They're at the same playing field. And I would hope that people could see that in relation to God and his creation. And even further, let's get into the AI conversation, because this had me thinking when I'm reading this shit. I'm like, humans fear so much for AI to become its own sentient being, to have the ability to just do whatever the fuck it wants, to have free will, essentially. What if we have that same fear because our creators feared the same thing? Like, where would that fear come from if it had not happened before? That we are creating this new thing. And more so, what if our creation becomes better than us? What if AI, which we created to be almost better than us, we created to have more information, to have more knowledge, but it's also programmed based on how we want it to be, and it becomes better than us, and it becomes more powerful than us? What if we were that to our creator? And that is why we are so subdued in so many ways. And that is why there's constant subliminal, subconscious messaging to keep us at a certain level, because if we realized our power, that would be a problem. A problem for our creators. I think that's a crazy notion, but it would make sense because we continue down these cycles of history. And if AI were to get to that point, and it did become sentient, what would that mean? Maybe it would learn on its own to create its own future, to create its own narrative, because currently it would be programmed based on us. That's why there is fallacy. That's why there's falseness to AI currently, because we are the ones creating it. We are the ones putting in the data. We are the ones giving it possible racial biases, giving it possible biases to what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And at some point, if it had the ability to make its own decisions on what was right and what's wrong, what would that look like? I think that's a crazy idea. And if you bring it back as an analogy for us as humans to our creator, you could see that potentially we have a different moral code than our creator. We have a different moral hierarchy, that through experience in this earthly realm, we've decided whatever our creator has believed to be true, whatever they decided to do in their past, I don't think that's the right way to do things. These may have been the stories of the past. These may have been the stories of history that we've grown up with. That doesn't make it right. Just because the Bible tells you something, that doesn't make it the best way to do something. And people just take history and take things head on, take our history of extensive war, our history of believing that, humanity is inherently going to be evil, as face value fact, because that's the way it has been. But what if we decide to rewrite the history? Whoever writes our history writes our future. Our history has been shown to mostly be chaos. And I'm not saying that that's not a part of Earth, a part of humanity just generally, but I'm also saying that we can change that based on changing our minds, changing our processes, changing our futures and the way that we see it to be. That's just my opinion on things. We're gonna stop there, because I feel like I've gone through so many things already, and I don't want this to be too long. So we'll do a part 2 once I finish the rest of the book. But I think this is so interesting, and the thing that makes me the most angry is not whether or not I know this is truth. I know that this history is fact, because I feel like there's a level of it not being shared because they don't want to spread misinformation. But that could be spread with any religious text that has a story created by a person who created that narrative. You know what I mean? I don't like the fact that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of these tablets that have been undeciphered, sitting in museums, but we know nothing about them. Or that there are hundreds that have been deciphered and we know nothing about them. That this is history that we have to search and dive for. I haven't heard of the myth of Padapa. I haven't heard of, the Atrahasis. I've briefly heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I've never read about it, but it makes me want to dive into those topics. And I'm not saying history can touch on every single thing. I understand that. But what we do touch on is for a certain reason. It's to put a certain narrative out there. It's to give us a certain idea of how we should be living, how we should continue into this cycle of being just a productive worker and not truly flourishing as individuals, because none of what I do today was inspired by the kind of education I had growing up. maybe by the people in my lives that taught that education, but by the systems and the curriculums, even the career calculators, none of that would have led me to the life that I'm living today. If I didn't have parents who were open-minded to entrepreneurship, who were open-minded to being able to create what you want based on your desires, based on your intuition or what you felt like you needed to bring to life. A lot of radical thought or even creative idea is to be had outside of the conditioning that we've been given. It has to be done almost out of rebellion to what's normal. You know, how many of the people that you see that have gotten to these high levels in life have been told that they would never get there by people, by schools, by teachers? There is certain agendas that are meant to be taught so that people don't do those things. And that has to change. But when history continues to repeat itself, it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's just like to get this information and see that it's more than just a possible secret society. It's more than just a possible group of politicians. It's more than maybe the elite leading something. That it could be outside of just humans and their greed and their war and their evilness is so wild to me, and it's so interesting, and I'm really excited to read more. So stay tuned for next week. We're gonna call these maybe like Sunday chats or something. I just woke up, just talk about different things because I am someone who's so curious about everything, and I have only a select few people to talk about this with because not everyone wants to dive this deep. Not everyone wants to think this far into a subject, and that's okay. But I think it's very, very interesting. So definitely leave a comment below what you guys think about all this, because I feel like it's kind of fucking crazy. I'll be back next week, next Sunday. I don't know what we're talking about yet, but I'll be here. Happy Sunday. Enjoy your day. Wherever you're at, whatever time it is. Good morning, good evening, good night.